Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast, a Ben Kinney training production, where we discuss the concepts of health, wealth, leadership, and legacy.
Ben, often we talk about the idea that growth comes from being uncomfortable. And I think for a lot of people, in order to get uncomfortable, often the things you have to do require courage. They require bravery. They require like being somebody more than maybe we think we can even are capable of being. Do you consider yourself a courageous person?
I think we should be always cognizant and careful to ever use a word that makes us feel elite in any manner. But I do strive to be brave. I do strive to have courage. And it's a word that Chad and you and me have been batting around today as we talk about what it takes to survive tough times or to move forward when all you want to do is quit or when you really want to freeze. And I did a little bit of research on these words. And one definition that I found that really stood out to me was that both of these words, bravery and courage, require us to take both action and risk. Action and risk. And those are two words that I'm incredibly comfortable with, Bob. Like, I am a take action right away person. Even if there's a conflict or if I said something wrong or I made a mistake, I want to resolve it. I don't want it to sit out there. And I also have maybe a higher tolerance for risk than other people. So if you were to use, does Ben take action and take risks? I would like to self-write myself into that box. What about you?
Yeah. I think, so you said something interesting. You said, we got to be careful with those words. And I think part of that is because there's a couple of different types of courage, right? Or a couple of different types of bravery. And I think we most commonly associate those words with the first type of bravery, which is physical bravery, right? People like the frontline responders that are out, working in hospitals right now, or a firefighter or a police officer or our military soldiers, people that are putting their lives at risk, right? Is that why you kind of hedged there in the beginning and said, hey, we got to be careful with these words? Because then you said, well, I'm a risk taker and I'm an action doer, right? But societally, we think about those people as brave and courageous.
Yeah, I think about the grocery store clerks and the people at the pharmacy and all these individuals that have such an unknown feeling about what's going on in the world today that even going to work takes a level of bravery or courage. Yeah, physical bravery is definitely one of the more common uses of those words,
which is why it feels weird to maybe call yourself courageous if you're not. I don't know if weird is the right, but calling yourself courageous, even though you technically defined it and you fit that criteria, feels slightly uneasy, right? Because you're like, I'm not the guy out there like leading the charge with the flag. Or
did you watch the movie Coming to America?
Yeah.
Who was the star? Was that Eddie Murphy?
Eddie Murphy, yeah.
Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
Remember when he was working at McDonald's?
McDougal's, you mean?
McDowell's. Mcdowell's? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Remember, right? When they don't have the golden arches,
they have golden art.
My entire life watching that movie, he's sitting in there, he's working with the burger place, and these guys with guns walk in, and they're trying to rob the burger place, right? And Eddie Murphy unscrews the mop or the broom, and he takes this stick and he kicks everybody's butt. My entire life, I've sat back and said, I'd be that guy. I would take the broomstick and I would unscrew it and I would beat up the bad guy. But would I? I don't know. I've never been in that
Sure.
situation, right?
Yeah. Let's hope you aren't ever in that situation.
I've been face to face with a grizzly bear, or face to face with black bears and with cougars and other things, and I stood my ground. And I've dealt with difficult situations, car wrecks, and I ran out there and opened the doors instead of freezing, right? But you always wonder, would you be physically brave, right? if the situation came to be, and you see people in situations like shootings where one person runs and the other person run towards it to try to do something, right? I even saw this video of this elk like attacking this lady in a national park, and you see all these people like running away, like nobody jumped, especially the guy recording it apparently, like nobody jumped in there and said, hey, I got it, I'll save you, right? And did a number 2 jump kick to the elk, or like nobody did that.
My favorite show is Seinfeld. I don't know if you guys are Seinfeld fans. That's the ending of Seinfeld, is them sitting there recording some guy getting robbed and laughing about it and making jokes, and then they get arrested. And that's like the season finale of Seinfeld is based on that concept of not doing the right thing.
Well, most of the time, those people who are physically brave are trained to be, so they don't think about it, right? It's the firefighter who goes through his training so many times. It's the military, it's the soldier who goes through the training so many times. So when the situation truly arises, they don't stop to think about it. They just react because it's how they've been trained. That's not something most of us do on a daily basis, yet you do train yourself to be ready to take risks.
Yeah.
You do train yourself to be someone who takes action. And as you defined it at the beginning, when you put action and risk together, you get bravery.
Yeah. You know, the second type of bravery, Chad, which kind of stands out maybe to more of our listeners, is psychological bravery. And I did a bunch of the Googling of this phrase to figure out, what does that really mean? And one of the reoccurring words that kept coming up was when somebody is vulnerable, when you're willing to admit your failures, your mistakes, or your weaknesses, you're allowing yourself, opening yourself up to criticism or to shame or to other people's disappointments. You are being psychologically brave. I remember the first time on a big major stage when I opened up about my life. And I remember walking off that stage, there was probably 12 or 15,000 people in the audience, and I wanted to puke because it was the first time in my life I had ever told some of those stories about growing up poor or hungry or dirty or being in those situations that you know really truly made me who I am today. So I don't regret any of it, but I was vulnerable. Now, the after effect of that was that people came up to me and said,
How brave.
well, not only how brave, but, you know, my mom had a problem with alcohol too.
Yeah.
My family, I was raised in this, right? I didn't have power. I had an outhouse, right? They related. I had these issues. I was depressed. Like whatever those things that we admit, it actually creates trust.
I remember you having that presentation that you're speaking about, and I don't think I've ever been prouder of you. I mean, I've known you for a long time now. We've been through quite a bit together. I've heard many of the stories, yet seeing you up there, brave is the word that would come to mind. To say how brave you were to be able to share that in front of so many strangers and friends who didn't know that about you, that now all of a sudden kind of that curtain had been revealed. So psychological bravery, you've got kind of being vulnerable is what you're talking about in that category.
And what it does, Chad, is it creates trust. It allows people to take you off the pedestal and say, that Bob guy, he's just a regular guy. And if a dumb shit like Bob can accomplish what he's accomplished, then maybe I have a fair chance of making it. If a real idiot like Ben can do these things, like, right, I have a fair chance. It allows people to take us off the pedestal because they've been justifying the fact that they can't do something for a long time because they're like, not Chad, he's just smart, or he's just athletic, or whatever those things might be. They don't know the chubby Chad. They don't know the eating Dairy Queen and sitting on the couch and struggling Chad. Like, they didn't know him. I knew him then, right? So when I see him today, I look at him and I am impressed, but I also know that anybody could do that because I saw where he came from. And being psychologically brave actually empowers people. Our goal, especially as, you know, in this podcast where we talk about leadership and legacy, should not be to impress people. It should be to empower them, to get them to take action. So what's the third type of bravery?
Now you've got moral bravery is what we would consider the third type of bravery in this conversation, right? Physical bravery, psychological bravery, and moral bravery, meaning speaking up for what's right is what we're talking about in this situation, right? Even when other people don't want to hear it or it's not the popular opinion.
Yeah, it's speaking up and saying that this is unfair. This is not right. You need to correct yourself, or, being a good friend to somebody. I had, our CFO of our companies, he called me last night and said, your email that you sent was inappropriate. Like, you should not have used those words. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I went back and I read it and I said, yep, you are absolutely right. I should not have done that. And he was morally brave. He called me out on it because he cares about me.
Right.
And it gave me an opportunity to call that person up and say, you know what, that was uncalled for. I apologize.
Which makes you have some of that psychological bravery you're talking about because you admitted your mistakes and your vulnerability in there.
Yeah, I had to be a little bit vulnerable and say, hey, I'm under a lot of pressure and I screwed up and I didn't mean that.
Right.
And we all run into that problem in leadership. The one that I think's the easiest to do is moral bravery. Because a lot of us have a clear sense of what's right and wrong. In fact, the way it's normally exhibited is we go on social media and tell everybody about how wrong they are or how wrong something is. That's the easy one. But are you willing to interrupt somebody, right, when they're speaking to their spouse in a restaurant inappropriately and say, hey, you really shouldn't talk to somebody that way? Or when somebody does something and you say, you need to apologize right now, a complete stranger, right? Because you said, that is just not right. That is not right. You need to fix that. I remember I was hiking the other day, actually up by your house, Chad, and I was walking down the trail and I see some kids and I see this thing flying through the bushes and they had taken the sign and they had thrown it into the bushes. And that was the kind of shit that we do when we were kids because we were rotten, right? Yeah. But I'm like, that's not right. So I just looked at the kids and I said, which one of you guys are going to go get that? And they looked at me like I was kidding. I'm like, no, go get it. Right? And I made them crawl through the bushes and grab that sign and put it back where it was. And then I said, get out of here. Right? And they ran out of there scared, but they did the wrong thing. And I was willing to call them out on it. And they weren't kids by any means. They were young adults or, 18-year-olds that needed a big slap in the back of the head.
Yeah.
So you're talking at the beginning of this, you talked about movie quotes. And of course, when you throw movies towards me, you're coming into my world, of course. So what I'm thinking is you're talking about this moral bravery is the quote from American President when he says, you want free speech. Let's see you acknowledge a man whose words make your blood boil, who's standing center stage and advocating at the top of his lungs, that at which you would spend a lifetime opposing at the top of yours. I mean, when we're talking moral bravery, it's being able to stand up and be able to have that conversation and say, this is what's right. It's Martin Luther King saying, this is what's right and making changes in the world, even if it's on a small scale.
Yeah.
I think those are like, you said that's the easiest one and people get on social media, but the saying something at a restaurant because you see somebody treating their date horribly is maybe one of the harder ones. I mean, I think we put physical bravery at the top, but like Chad said, a lot of people that take that as an employment role are highly trained to do those things. The moral bravery in public, where there's confrontation potentially behind that, is I think one you don't see it very often. Have you guys seen the TV show What Would You Do with John Quinones?
Oh yes,
that's based entirely around this idea of moral bravery. Are you willing to stand up when you see something happening that's not right?
I think each person's going to be different, right? I think what we're realizing here as we go through it is somebody might think, well, physical bravery is really easy for them because maybe they have been trained or they've been in that position where they've fought back to protect from the elk that's attacking somebody in a park or whatever that might be. Some people might have it a lot easier with the psychological bravery where they're really open about admitting their vulnerabilities and all of that stuff. And then there might be those people who have that moral bravery. And then on the other side of it, some of us are going to be challenged with just one of those, and it might be a little different for each person. Bob, let me just, of the three, you're saying moral bravery, you think for you might be the toughest?
No, so when I look at like my career and the places where I wish I would have made that call, done that thing, had that conversation with my boss, it's probably psychological bravery, right? And I admitting, I think I do a pretty good job of admitting my vulnerabilities, and I'll talk freely and have for years. When we ran Active Rain, and I put a lot of my life on display there. That psychological bravery for me though is like, it's doing that thing you're uncomfortable with, right? And a lot of times, I think in our careers especially, we don't do that thing we're uncomfortable with that would have gotten us to that next level, right? That would have made us a better leader, would have made us a more productive employee, because we're not comfortable with it. It's uncomfortable. So I'm just going to keep doing it the way I've done it. So for me, like, admitting your vulnerabilities is a piece of psychological bravery, but it's going beyond what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, the one definition I found said it's facing rather than avoiding your fears.
Yeah.
It's running at it. It's taking on your challenges, threats. It's just going to that thing and resolving it. Because if we don't do that, what happens is resentment builds, anger builds, relationships end, right? We disengage. And that's how you see that in leadership, especially when you're leading other people, is they don't feel brave, courageous, or another way to put it, safe, and come to you and saying, hey, that was inappropriate. Like, you said the wrong thing. You did the wrong thing. We're flawed individuals, and we stick our feet in our mouth on a regular basis, right? Especially the Chads of the world.
Some of us a lot more than others.
And the Bobs of the world and the Bens of the world. Like, we do that. We have to decide, are we willing to take action and take risks and be okay with the consequences because we are committed to our values and our convictions. What I've been trying to do in the Win, Make, Give podcast is to leave people with questions and homework, things that they could go reflect on as an exercise so that they don't just learn, they take action. So what I would like to challenge you with is I want you to ask yourself some questions. How are you being brave? Are you being physically brave, psychologically brave, morally brave? Are you being brave by supporting unpopular decisions or by becoming emotionally vulnerable? How is your bravery causing people to admire you or your leadership or your company? And how is bravery causing people to resent you? How does bravery or your lack of bravery create or exclude you from certain opportunities or experiences? Of the types of bravery that we discussed today, which one do you need the most help with? What will happen to you personally or to your business if you don't start taking more action, if you don't start taking more risk, if you don't start showing up as courageous and brave? Where is that going to leave you? I'd encourage you to take 5 minutes today, tonight, this morning, whenever you're listening to this podcast, with a journal or a piece of paper, and answer these questions. Write out what bravery means to you, what courage means to you, how it's holding you back or pushing you forward, and how you can encourage it in your organization, in your family, or in your relationships. Leaders run to the problem. Leaders take action. Leaders take risks. Be brave. Be courageous. That's our message today.
All right, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to post those questions Ben just posed to you. We're going to post them in our Facebook group. So that's facebook.com/groups/win-make-give. That way you'll have those questions. You can journal about them. We would love for you, if you are ready to be psychologically brave, to post those answers. Let us know what your strengths and challenges are in the bravery world. Until then, remember to subscribe wherever it is you subscribe to podcasts. We would love to get a rating and a review from you. And we would also love for you to share this episode with someone. We know there's someone you want to hear this episode. So share it with them and bring them to the Facebook group so we can hear their response. Until our next episode, remember, wash your hands, and as always, do good.